In the scope knowledge area, there are 6 processes, 4 in planning and 2 in monitoring and controlling. Our first process is plan scope management, which essentially gives us our guidance on how to define our scope documents and requirements documents, how to do testing, and how to deal with change requests as it relates to scope. So the main thing that comes out of this is the scope management plan and requirements management plan. It's going to be influenced by the project life cycle, in other words, the type of project we're doing and the approach we're taking to get it done. Now our next process is again a planning process. It's called collect requirements. The main thing it creates are requirements documentation and a traceability matrix where applicable. So if we think about requirements, requirements are basically what it's supposed to do, what's it supposed to look like, feel like, run like, perform like, etc. If you were ordering a pizza, requirements were how thick is the crust and what do you want on the pizza and where do you want it sent to. So requirements, this is where we really start to get deep into what exactly are we doing. Now our next process, again a planning process, is called define scope, and it takes the requirements documentation and starts to elaborate on it and kind of gets me a narrative of what I'm trying to create. Also, it gets more of a focus on deliverables, and a very important part, it also focuses on exclusion. So it's very easy to say what we're doing, but also focusing on what we are not doing so we know the very clear border and boundary between in and out of scope is very key. And the scope statement, which is the output, the main output of this process, helps deliver that. Also, we can update the assumption log as we know more about assumptions, things we believe to be or to not be the case with this project. And then our final planning process is create WBS, or create work breakdown structure. Now, the output of this is a little misleading because you would tend to think, well, the output is the work breakdown structure. The scope baseline is actually the output. So the scope baseline consists of 3 things. My scope statement, which was the output of defined scope, my work breakdown structure, which is created here, and my work breakdown structure dictionary, which is basically all the attributes that we know about those particular pieces of the work breakdown structure. So not just what's in the box, but all the details behind what's in the box that makes up that particular part of the work breakdown structure. Now, a key tool and technique here is decomposition. This is where we take the requirements and the scope statement and we hammer them into smaller pieces until we've got our arms around what those pieces represent. Now, those 4 processes represent the planning part of scope. Now, our next process, actually the final 2, are going to be in monitoring and controlling. So validate scope is our next process. So this is actually the customer accepting or testing and accepting what it is we're trying to create. So if we think about it, in direct and managed project work, we create a deliverable. In control quality, we test it to see if we think it's good. So in the IT world, control quality is kind of like system test or unit test. And then validate scope, this process is kind of like user acceptance testing. So in other words, if in control quality we believe it's good, then we go to validate scope essentially for user acceptance testing, and the customer says yay or nay, good or bad. So ideally we have accepted deliverables. We could also have adjusted change requests, for things that aren't aligning with what we expect and we have to make adjustments. Now, our final process, again a monitoring and controlling process, is control scope. So you're going to see a pattern as a general rule. Work performance data in and then work performance information out, change requests out, project management plan updates out, project document updates out as far as outputs, and whether it's control scope, schedule, cost, quality, basically anything other than monitor and control project work and perform integrated change control. If it's in monitoring and controlling, that pattern is going to be the case. As far as work performance data in, work performance info coming out, change requests coming out, project management plan and project document updates coming out. Now with this process, this could be we're going to add something to the project, thus scope creep, and we're trying to get it approved. It could be our requirements document, scope statement, and WBS are not all in sync. So maybe we need to add an exclusion, or maybe we need to break things down to a little more detail. So a change request here could send us back to some of those other planning processes we did earlier to fine-tune whether it's requirements, a scope statement, the WBS dictionary, etc. And so that's what the control scope process does for us. It's kind of that catch-all of expansion or clarification of project-related scope. So again, we have 6 processes, 4 in planning, 2 in monitoring and controlling. In planning, we have plan scope management, collect requirements, define scope, create WBS. In monitoring and controlling, we have validate scope and control scope.